And welcome back to the Champion Draft Series. Today we've got another very special interview with one of our players, Spidz, coach of the Redeemable Qualities. How are you doing, Spidz?
I'm going pretty well. Are you going well?
I'm doing great, and I want to dive immediately into some of these questions that we have for you. So you, particularly, were the last pick in the draft order when it came to the draft for the Champion Draft Series, but that meant that when you cycled into the next round, you would be the first pick, meaning you essentially had two back-to-back picks. What was your strategy going into the draft, and if you don't mind sharing it with us?
Yeah, so being like what's it called? It's being the wheel. That's what someone told me it was called, like being the wheel. It meant that I only had like 4 instances of actually interacting with the drafting, which meant I could separate it into chunks, right? I've got the first chunk, the second, 5, sorry, separated into chunks, which was interesting. It meant that I could view it in like your first 2 picks can be your power picks, your second 2 picks can try and synergize with those picks, as opposed to like trying to find instances in each individual thing. If you're in the center, right, you get 10 instances of choosing. It meant that I could go for combos, and I thought about that, but Echo was taken early, so I thought about going Zillion Echo, but I couldn't do that combo, right? But I think divvying it up into certain categories worked out well for me, and that was sort of what changed because of being the wheel. But going into the draft, the first few picks were power, middle few picks were trying to synergize, last few picks were rounding it out.
A solid strategy, and it seems to have worked out for you so far. You, like half of the players in the series right now, are currently 2-2 halfway through the season, so it's very neck and neck right now going into the second half of the season. But you have managed to surprise a lot of your opponents, regardless of wins or losses, with a wide variety of deck builds that are particularly aimed at like targeting their weaknesses, and sometimes just come out of left field and just like really surprise them. What is your mindset when you were preparing for a game against one of your opponents?
Yeah, I look at their champions, I see what sort of strategies they might be going for, and I think about fun ideas that might beat them. So like the out of the way in week 1 was like, oh, I see they got a bunch of mid-range stuff. If I play out of the way Divine Judgment, I will win. It didn't end up happening, but that was my thinking, right? I've got all these sorts of different ideas. My collection is like 30 decks, all titled !CDS, and then something else or other. And a lot of it's just like, I'm looking through the collection, I'm seeing what cool ideas could work. I open up Bilgewater, I see, oh, Bilgewater has this idea, I can go for this, and maybe that'll be interesting. And it's also focused on what they're bringing, right? So Mafrahu was definitely going to bring Lurk, so I thought, okay, I need to deal with X1s, X2s, X3s, as well as these Overwhelm guys. How can I do that properly? Didn't end up panning out, but that's the mindset that I'm going into this with.
Sure, and you did end up beating her Lurk deck. She just ended up surprising you with another deck that she had not brought to the series yet before. Now, I've been asking this question to every player in these interviews so far about their plans going into the trade week. They have 1 or 2 champions that they might not have utilized or brought to the series yet, and if they're maybe looking to trade those for something else or strengthen out their roster. You have actually managed to utilize every champion in your roster so far, which is very unique. But I still want to ask, do you think there's any weaknesses in your lineup? And if so, do you think that this trade week upcoming will allow you to adjust that or maybe perhaps improve your roster a bit?
Yeah, so I think there's 2 ways to go through this. One is that I do think I do have some weaknesses. I've got a lot of mid-range champions, right? They're going to lose to Scorched Earth. They're going to lose to a specific type of removal that continually hits them, right? And every week, if I try and bring triple aggro, one of my decks ends up being mid-range. If I bring triple control, one of my decks ends up being mid-range. And so they can target that deck and make that an issue. So diversifying things, like maybe getting out of Darius, maybe getting out of Alawi, might help that as a possibility. But furthermore, when trying to deck build, I've noticed that I really wanted PNZ in one instance. I really wanted Shurima in another instance. So I think going for the champions that I want and maybe getting out of my second Targon, getting out of my second SI might be something I look for in trying to make it so that it's not as much a weakness that I'm beating, but getting even stronger with how my deck building can go forth, which is something that I think the draft can definitely give you as well.
Something that I think every player is trying to aim for, and I wish you the best of luck in that. I'm going to go a little off subject now. I wanted to see if you could provide us a little bit of insight into your team name, the Redeemable Qualities.
Yeah, it's hard to think of a team name. I was thinking, what is Spidzian? Like, if I think of myself and what people think about me, what is Spidzian? And I thought that I've got all these phrases that I like to say. I like to say coolio, folio. I like to say okie dokie, artichoke, all these things. And so one that I thought was interesting is redeemable qualities, which is a sentence that I say in reference to, like, if someone asks me my opinion on something and it's sort of positive, but I don't want to commit to it being positive, I say, oh, that's got some redeemable qualities. And so I thought, if my team is going to be slightly positive, but I don't want to commit to it being too positive, I thought I'd call myself the redeemable qualities. And I think it actually fits quite well.
I do as well. I think it's a fantastic name. Before we wrap up here, I have to ask you, going into this second part of the season, there's still several really intimidating players that you have not had the chance yet to face off, including our current second place holder, Puffball Panda, who's only lost to Mafferju, and then Ikado's terrifyingly adaptable lineup that does have access to a lot of those flocks and scorched earths that you mentioned earlier. How confident are you going into these players?
Not very. I think they've got extremely difficult lineups. Ikado especially, right? If the Bane of Demacia is Noxus and, mid-range is Demacia, I brought nothing but Demacia if you want to be so reductive. Ikado's definitely scary. I think there are ways to get around him, though. I think there are ways you can deck build to beat those sorts of decks. Same with Puffball Panda. Same with Elzon as well. There are fear factors among everything I could be fighting, and each week brings its own challenges, right? I think I've thought about the challenges in previous weeks decently enough, even if the results haven't been 100%. I think I've analysed them interestingly, and I think I can do the same with Ikado, Puffball, Elzon, and Capitao again.
We look forward to seeing how you do it. That basically wraps up our interview, but I wanted to add one additional bit. At the Champion Draft Series, we've been keeping tabs on a lot of statistics on every little thing involving these champions that are in all the players' rosters. And I wanted to ask you a little trivia question and see if you could guess it right. Now, what champion do you think in your roster you have played from hand the most?
Gwen.
Gwen is incorrect.
Okay, can I have a second guess?
I'll allow a second guess.
Let's go Shen.
It is, in fact, Shen. Shen has been played from hand 5 times, which is incredible because 2 of the 3 times you brought Shen, it was actually banned. But you ended up bringing the Protector, the tutor for Shen in that match versus Mafferju, which allowed you to draw it several times, play it several times. Alawi is your most drawn champion, sitting at 8 draws, but you've actually only played her 4 times.
Right, does that include champion spells? Because I played Allow Tentacle Slam, surely.
Yeah, it doesn't count champion spells because then because it transforms into a different card, essentially.
Cool, I had no clue, thanks.
Yeah, we have a lot of these numbers for some reason, and I'm glad that we're getting some fun out of it. So thank you very much for joining us, and myself, as well as the rest of the series, and I'm sure many viewers at home, are looking forward to seeing your performance through the remainder of the series.
Yeah, I am too. Isn't that lucky?